So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our great friends at Nudesic, and they're going to talk to us about an incredible topic. I think we're all going to get a lot out of this. DevOps and Agile, and do they conflict? Are they the same? Are they kind of different flavors of the same thing? Or are they actually different things but are symbiotic? We're going to find out all about that. And I think Chad's going to be doing that for us. So I am going to stop presenting and let Chad take over.
Appreciate it, Simon. Yeah, I just wanted to make an introduction myself. I'll be the MC for the event, and I'm Corey Chicoine. I'm newer to Nudesic and been in Arizona about 2 years. I've been active in SIM in a few different cities, Boston, Pittsburgh. I've been to a few national events, and I had met with Patty Walker on some project stuff a while back and just brought up SIM randomly. I didn't know she was a member and whatnot. And so we kind of, at Nudesic, you buy into, you get out of stuff what you put into it. And I had mentioned wanting to present and sort of, get on the radar, just make introductions. I know we have some ties to some folks on the board and membership and vice versa. So I appreciate you guys having us on today. That said, I'll lob it over to Chad. In the sake of time, Chad Cook is our VP of Solutions. He'll be the one running the majority of the presentation. Mike Ulishny is our VP from a Desert Mountain perspective. He oversees operations and sales within Arizona, Denver, and a few other offices in between. And then Tim Parsons is newer to our firm. He's a director of business advisory services. So from a panel discussion, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible. We've gotten that message from the board members a few times that, this is what you guys wanted to hear about. We're trying to make a pretty unattractive or black and white topic attractive to you guys. And so give you guys some takeaways, run through some things. We're not painfully shy, but hopefully you guys aren't either. So the more questions, the merrier on the front end. It'll help us. If not, I have some loaded questions to fill in the gaps, but hopefully you guys can, we'll drive the bus, but if you guys steer it, it makes things easier. So we'll get into Chad's agenda on the front end. Please chime in if you have anything. And then on the tail end, we have a formal panel discussion set aside, but would like to make that sort of throughout the presentation if possible. But with that long-winded introduction, I'll shut up and toss it over to Chad.
Yeah, Corey took care of introductions and most of the agenda, but it's just pleasure for us to kind of be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. Agile, DevOps, those are two kind of almost seeming conflicting, as Simon mentioned, I think when we were talking about this a couple of months ago. Are these polar opposites? Really what Nudesic's found with a lot of these implementations and these kind of changes in organizational structure is they're very complementary to each other. And so what we'll be going through this evening is just a quick overview, kind of what is Agile, what is DevOps. We want to make sure kind of that foundation's there. We'll be breezing through this part. We really are saving a lot of the time for the expert panel, but should you have any questions, obviously feel free to use the chat or just even interrupt. We're used to that. Then we'll be going through kind of just throughout that kind of how they're comparing, like where are they similar, where are they different, just that type of thing. You'll start to see how they emerge as we're talking about Agile, and then as we're talking about DevOps. Oh, they kind of already mentioned that before. And then lastly, kind of really that value add. We've taken 5 or 6 topics which are the convergence of Agile and DevOps, and making sure that we're kind of sharing some of that information with you guys. So how does an organization get faster and better, right? One of the DevOps principles. Or how does an organization write good user stories or requirements so that as it moves through the development cycles, it can be done a little bit more effectively and things like that. So we're going to be sharing some of our kind of thoughts with you guys. And then, like we said at the end, this is the biggest question we get, right? A lot of organizations go through those Agile transformations, or even now DevOps transformations. You can go through the training, you can get the certifications, but when that rubber hits the road, what is it really like? And so kind of within the 3 of us, I think we can answer a lot of your questions. If not, we can always get back to you, but thought it would be a good, fun experience just to kind of talk through. We can give you those war stories. We can give you the happy, yellow brick road type things, but really kind of, we're here to share a lot of our experience with you guys. So moving through it, Mr. Ulich, you want to run through Agile real quick?
Absolutely. So what we wanted to do here was kind of set a baseline. So I actually remember 16 years ago getting my first certification in Agile, which was the Scrum certification, and most of us came through, and the first thing you want to do is note that the way you do it is 10 times better than the previous way, and so you start to badmouth waterfall and PMI. And what I learned pretty quickly was that PMI and waterfall wasn't the issue. It was the way people had changed it, or really started to form it to how they wanted to view it. And it wasn't the methodology that was all the problem. And then it's important to always go back to the roots of the methodology and really understand that. I've found that Agile is kind of the same way. Now that DevOps is becoming a methodology for software development, and something that we use a lot of at Nudesic, I've also found that people will go in with a connotation of DevOps is better, and it's nothing like Agile. And there are actually a lot of similarities, and there are a lot of areas where DevOps is just an additional next segment for software development. So what I want to do here is just kind of go through the Agile Manifesto, which was when Agile was brought about by these gentlemen who put it together just over 20 years ago, what they wanted to work towards. And this is the basis for everything that's Agile. And what you're going to see when Chad and Tim start to go through with DevOps is there's a lot of similarities and a lot of the same goals. So the first thing is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So what the gentleman here wanted to note was that a lot of times people thought that it was the writing of requirements or the use of software development methodology or tools that was more important. And it's not to say those items aren't important, they're critical to software development, but it was the individuals and the team members and their interactions within the different groups, whether it's a product owner, the person who actually understands the product, and the software developers. It was those interactions that was more important. The next piece that they wanted to make sure that was the core to Agile methodology was it's working software over comprehensive documentation. For those of us that remember large requirements documents and the original waterfall projects, you would put a giant requirement document together before you started a project. And that documentation, a lot of times they felt was more important than what they were building. And what these gentlemen wanted to make sure that was understood is it's not documentation that's most important. It's still important and it is critical, but it's more important to have working software. The next one is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So this is something that's very funny to hear from a consulting, because we have contracts and they're vital to our communication with our customers, but they are not the most important piece to a successful software project. And that's actually very important to Nudesic. And a big reason for our growth and our success is that customer collaboration is always much more important to us than contract negotiation. It's working with the customer to find a solution and actually communicating with them, like I mentioned before, in those individual interactions, much more than a contract negotiation. And the last piece, and a lot of times, one of the most important and biggest differences to kind of where software project management was when Agile came about and this manifesto was built 23 years ago, it was responding to change over following a plan. So it's the idea that you should have a plan. You originally have a plan that everyone's shooting for, but respond to change. Understand that things are going to change. Software development is complex. And a lot of times you don't know a lot about what you're building until you start building it. And a good Agile team will respond to change over sticking to that plan at all costs. They will update that plan. And those three things ahead of it, the customer collaboration, the working software, and the individuals and their actions, allow you to respond to that change. So as we get to these, the DevOps, I want to make sure that all of you kind of remember the Agile Manifesto didn't have anything about having a 2-week sprint. It didn't say that you had to have a retrospective, or that you had to have a sprint planning where the product owner approved every story and it couldn't change. None of that was in the original Agile Manifesto. There are other methodologies that came after this that were very good, like Scrum or Kanban. But this Agile Manifesto and Agile works really well with DevOps, because this was the goal of the original team members that built the Agile Manifesto. Next slide. So as you get into DevOps, you're also going to see a lot of things that where the benefits of Agile are the benefits of DevOps. One of the first was accurate delivery. So that last bullet that said, respond to change, because you respond to change and you're interacting with the customer and you've got that great transparency with the customer, you're going to have much more accurate delivery. That type of transparency is critical to accurate delivery, and it's one of the reasons Agile has become one of the keys to software development. Improved quality, that interaction with the customer allows you to attain improved quality, because a lot of people think quality is that you meet all of the requirements, and that's actually not the key to quality. The key to quality is having a customer that is part of your development process, and you build a product the customer wants. Visibility, obviously, with that transparency, the individuals, interaction, those types of things allow for much better visibility on Agile projects. Reliability, so because you're giving working software continually, you're going to get reliability very quickly in an Agile project. That working software is key, and you're going to see DevOps is going to come in with a lot of tools that actually enhance that. More control. This is really funny because most people that are traditional waterfall project managers feel like they lose control when you do an Agile project. And in all actuality, you have more control because you're seeing working software early and often. So you're able to control what you're actually going to deliver to the customers. So that traceability, that visibility, that interaction, all of that leads to more control actually for the developers, for the product owners, and for the project managers. And then it's another one that really confuses waterfall project managers, is they think that as soon as you vary from a project plan, that means you're definitely going to be have unpredictable cost and you're going to be out of schedule. But it's that working software early and often, it's that interaction, it's that communication, it's all of those things that allow you to actually get predictable cost, because you're able to stop things from going wrong early. You're able to fail fast, and you're able to adjust the schedule and the scope according to what the customer wants. And so you get much more predictable schedule as well, because you can adjust early, which is not going to allow you to have that lag that you have in those old waterfall projects, where at the end you find out you're all wrong and in the project is too late to save. You fix it early. So those are just a few of the benefits you get with Agile, and I'm excited for you guys to see when you get to the DevOps piece, you're going to see a lot of similarities and crossover. The last piece I just wanted, I mentioned a lot about waterfall and Agile. And you'll see the difference between waterfall and Agile. You're not going to see as much difference when you go to DevOps. So in the old days with waterfall, you had cost, scope, and time, that iron triangle. That doesn't go away with Agile, but you do it in small segments. So the top there was what we used to have was with a waterfall project, you would do a chunk of the code, and the milestone would come in, and another chunk of the code, and you would see the whole picture. With Agile, you take small increments of what you're building so you can get working software. That working software in an Agile project is the outline of the model, and then the background, and then the color. So if you're going to make changes to, in this case, the woman on the screen, it'd be much easier to change how long her arms are when you're just erasing some of the arm length, as opposed to up top, you'd have to get rid of the color and the background, and it's much harder. So that's just a big difference between waterfall and Agile that you're going to see. You're not going to see as big a difference when you get to DevOps. All right, Chad, you're up. Or Tim, I think, right?
Yeah. Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wasn't sure because it wasn't showing on the system. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us here tonight. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about DevOps. So what is it, and how does it really differ from Agile? And as Mike was mentioning, you're going to find later toward the end of this presentation, they're much more similar and they really complement each other. So if we take a look at what is DevOps, there's three core tenets. And I think of this in the way of people and process to be able to get your code developed faster, a faster software product out the door. So that increases your velocity. Your service reliability and uptime on the products that you do produce is much better. And the really cool thing is the shared ownership and the collaboration that Mike mentioned, not only between your own IT group, but with your business group and sometimes even your customers. So let's take a look at the next slide and see what the DevOps organization, if you establish or have one, what are some of the values? And they look very similar to the Agile values. So we talked about faster delivery. There are companies that are seeing software delivering 20 times faster, and lower mean time to restore. This is great because, and we'll see this in a minute, in a metric that we'll show you on how to measure the value of your DevOps so that you can restore your systems much quicker. And then it becomes more efficient because you have your teams working together, those that know the requirements, those that are doing the development, and those are doing the testing, and also your customer, your business, looking at that. You get better security. Because you're developing faster and there's more touch points along the way in the process, you are minimizing the vulnerability of possible areas of fraud or where there might be breaks in the software itself. So all of these things will lead to improved customer satisfaction and satisfaction by your other stakeholders. And in this little chart here, we think that
minutes or 20 from here. There is all families. But
I think we have one in the background talking.
But, out, and you will want to pass all night. Now, in Europe, we think.
Thank you. So we do see improved satisfaction, and in some cases, with some companies, we do see that the NPS score, their Net Promoter Scores, are improved. And then all of these things lead to greater profitability because we're delivering software and products much faster, and we're getting the quality out quicker, and it's a more stable product. So let's go to the next slide here. And once we have the DevOps organization set up, what are 3 ways that we can look at our organization to see if it's actually working? So first is flow. We're going to be able to reduce handoffs. We should be able to see that as it's moving down the cycle. And we should be making work much more visible to all of those groups that are involved. And then this will eliminate a lot of your waste. The second is feedback. The really cool thing about this is seeing problems as they occur. And not only within the development team, but your business stakeholders as well, so that they can pinpoint things right there and say, hey, you know, the requirement, we need to make a little change here. So they're able to go right in and quickly start to resolve those issues that they see in the development. And then lastly here, experiment. What comes to mind for me, for those of you that are familiar with Kaizen and that process, that's the continual learning and the continual improvement. So we're always taking a look at various steps in the software development cycle to make improvements. And we're learning from those so that the next phase of the development cycle or the next sprint we have, we learn from that and apply those learnings to the next release.
Hey, Tim, I don't mean to interrupt, and as well as the team. We were going to do some poll the audience questions. I think Stephanie's going to send them out. It'll give us sort of a benchmark on who's leveraging what technology, just to give us sort of a better feel for the room and whatnot, so we can cater the rest of the agenda and sort of our questions accordingly. So I think Stephanie I'm in there. We've just been buzzing through it and haven't been able to. So sorry to interrupt. She didn't want to. I said I didn't have a problem doing so. So
yeah, I didn't want to be rude and just say, hey, wait a minute. So just really quick, they're quick, my version of yes, no's. So first, let me launch this one. Just wanted to know how many folks on the call have implemented Agile. Let's see, got 16, getting there, a few more seconds. All right. I think everybody's getting close to done. So it looks like about 81% of the folks on the phone have implemented Agile. Share the results real quick. Can everybody see those?
Yes.
All righty. And the next one, cancel, stop share. The next one is around how many folks have actually implemented DevOps. Looks like we had a little bit of a difference here. A few more folks are waiting on to answer.
Stephanie, this is Bipin. Maybe you should have something like, I started it, but failed.
Got into it, kind of lost where I was.
I knew Bipin would want shades of gray as an answer.
Of course he would. We decided on yes, no, Bipin.
it is a good point because, I mean, I played with it, but not, I mean, in terms of full deployment.
I look forward to the conversation area of this because there's a lot to be said.
Oh, definitely. All right. Well, and I'm going to assume the difference in the number of people that answered will be your shades of gray, Bipin. So we'll share the results here. So we've got people who just don't have an idea where to start, but we didn't have as many answers. So I think the ones that didn't answer are going to be the ones that, those are the ones that started and didn't get all the way through. All right, so we'll save the last one for the slide at the end. So sorry, guys, sorry to interrupt. Now we can get back on a roll. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, so I've got one more slide here. So what are the key measurements that you typically look at within a DevOps organization? They really are your deployment frequency, how fast you're delivering, your lead time, for changes, how fast are you getting those changes out? And you can see here on the right side that we have a maturity model where you can see your elite or your high performing teams. It's quite significantly different. So for instance, the deployment frequency is you can do deployments in one-day cycles. Compared to a lower performing team all the way over at the right, it could be anywhere from once a week to a month. Your lead time changes less than 1 hour compared to the lower where it could be up to 6 months. And then your mean time to resolve or restore your system if it goes down, usually less than 1 hour. I've seen 1 to 4 hours typically. And then for a lower performing organization, it'll be a week to a month. And then that change failure rate is much, much lower where you have much more successful deployments within the elite group than you do the low group, where almost half of the deployments fail.
I don't mean to interrupt, but are you going to get into the, because here you're basing the key measurement on the number of deployments. Are you going to add a measurement here as to the change management strategy within an organization and their ability to absorb the changes and educate the users
that is
on what is happening?
Yes. We don't have that here for this slide, but that is definitely a big piece of this. And that gets into the whole change management for adoption. so that because there is a methodology to be able to make sure people are aware of the change coming up, looking at your change agents within different groups, such as your business stakeholder groups that might be impacted, your IT development groups, and it could be even other areas within the organization, such as marketing, finance, depending on what kind of function the software development is leading toward. But setting up key change agents in the very beginning and having a very clear defined process in the beginning of this, when you go out to set up the DevOps organization, and really making it understandable to those that will be participating, really help to bring the adoption along in the organization. And Chad, I'm going to ask you to, if you want to add on to that, or Mike.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. A lot of these measurements, kind of the ones we have here, and there could be hundreds or thousands, right? However you want to slice and dice some of that data, is really kind of some of the key ones that the DevOps handbook in particular kind of starts to call out. These are really around kind of the software focus of it and how do we develop software really with higher quality and get those deployments and essentially value into our customers' hands a little bit quicker. But absolutely, kind of to the point and to the question, this is an organizational change. This isn't something where we're looking at it from a single project delivery, but this is that larger kind of org change. So this is, how does IT start working with the business a little bit better? How do we get that requirements flow? And I'll jump into those in a couple of slides here, but it's a big kind of culture shift. We used to have a slide. We did a DevOps roadshow a couple of months ago, or years ago, actually, at this point. And as we look at it kind of like from a pie perspective, DevOps is probably about 10-15% a technology change for an organization. The rest of that is an org change. So very much, and that's why kind of Tim's a very in-demand person in kind of our organization of helping organizations adopt some of these principles and adopt some of these changes that we're talking about in a sec. Cool. So with that, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, all right.
Just said thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of, as I mentioned, we want to really kind of share. So, I mean, high level, and again, we spent 15 minutes on it, right? We didn't get into a deep dive. We can spend hours or days really talking about the kind of DevOps, kind of the principles that Tim kind of skimmed over, or some of the way we can deliver software using kind of Agile, and whether it's Scrum or Kanban and those types of things. But what we wanted to really do is, how can we help you guys today? And so we've come up with 5 pieces of, these are kind of just offerings and ways that we've engaged with our customers. So kind of boiled them down a little bit, so they're a little bit genericized. But from these 5 things, hopefully it's kind of key takeaways for you guys of this. These are things we can bring back, kind of to the point that was brought up a little bit earlier around kind of, we started and failed. We've seen that a lot. Nudesic itself's done that quite a bit as well. And so just kind of want to share some of this stuff with you guys. Definitely, as I go through these, if you have questions on the fly, let's talk through it. We can definitely drill into a lot of these. So it's just not me talking. So of these 5, the first is really that overall adoption, kind of what we were hitting at, in that organizational wide foundation. So I'll kind of talk to that a little bit. There's a concept, and I don't know how many people are familiar with it. There's not a lot of cameras on, so we can kind of half show of hands. But how many people are familiar with value stream mapping? Couple on the camera, cool. So extrapolate for 40% or so. It's a very powerful tool. We're seeing it coming back into the spotlight within IT organizations. A lot of the DevOps stuff, I don't know if you've noticed, those of us that have been around for a little bit longer, and the lean type methodologies, we're borrowing a lot from these. And so that value stream mapping's coming from those lean manufacturing pieces. Now just look at the way we deliver software. We're also going to walk through how we define work. Mike kind of touched on that a little bit from the kind of how do we gather those requirements, we have a really great methodology of how we really start looking at it from a customer's data's perspective and going through it. We'll talk about how we actually organize teams to deliver that software. And then finally, and as kind of Corey mentioned, a takeaway is a matrix of where you may be fitting in some of this stuff. So just jumping into it here, as I mentioned, this is a very large organizational shift. And so we kind of focus, and we're using Neudesic as kind of the standard right now, but a lot of organizations have followed the same kind of footprint. We start with that agile training for all employees. This isn't just the IT staff. This especially isn't just kind of the software developers, and then infrastructure and everybody else doesn't really apply to it. This is an organizational shift. So we absolutely suggest everyone in the organization be aware of kind of agile, whether we adopt Scrum or Kanban, one of those different flavors of it, but making sure the entire organization understands it. The same thing on the kind of that program management piece. So as we start to elevate out and as we start to look at things like moving from project centric to more of a product centric type organization where we organize our business and our technology teams a little bit differently, again, you want to make sure that you have that full alignment across the board. You also want a tool that you can use to track all this work. And that's where those measurements that Tim was talking about before. Azure DevOps is a great tool. I don't know if you guys are using that. Jira and the Confluence stack, or I'm sorry, Jira and the Atlassian stack have a lot of great tools from that perspective as well. But you just want to measure that work. You want to measure it going through the funnels, and I'll show you how to do that with the value stream in a second. And then lastly, and we can kind of send out kind of what our required reading is, but the DevOps Handbook's a great book. It's a little bit technical, but I absolutely recommend everybody on this call, if you haven't already, read the Phoenix Project. It's a kind of a narrative or novel around DevOps, doesn't get super technical, but really walks through a lot of those 3 ways that Tim walked through in a lot more detail in the context of a company developing a fairly large application. There's also another variant of it called the Unicorn Project, because people that can do DevOps tend to be unicorns out there. And so another variant of it, so either pick up the Unicorn Project or the Phoenix Project that are out there. So the value stream, and a couple of hands kind of popped up with this. Really, a value stream is just that it's a mapping of the process. And so what we look at is what is value. So the first thing is defining as an organization what's valuable, and a lot of that could be, you know, new features for my customer. Those new features may end up being new revenue streams. Maybe it's ways to reduce some of the reduce errors, kind of get more efficient to it. Those are highly valuable. They tend to make money value, right? Patches and upgrades are not very valuable. Most of the time, my customers don't even know that they happen, but it's just part of that IT cycle. We got to make sure our applications are up and running, that we have the right security model or policies in place and things like that. And then lastly, on the bugs and incidents, and one of the things that Tim talked through was moving quality closer to the source. And so as we start to change how we deliver software, one of the things we do is put more onus and responsibility on our developers to make sure that they're taking ownership of the application. I'll give you kind of a quick story from one of our strong partners, Microsoft side. As they were going through and building one of their kind of the new Azure DevOps tool, they took, and let's just hypothetical numbers, have 1,000 developers and 1,000 QA resources. They told all the QA resources, here's a couple of months, you're going to retool and become developers. The reason they did that was they shrunk the QA team down to just the most valuable team members and the ones that we just need to do some of that user acceptance testing, and moved the rest over to automated QA, so still a developer or full-blown developers. The reason they did that was they also put a bunch of monitoring tools in place so that as errors occurred, the developers were woken up, not the operations team, not others. So all of a sudden, developers are writing better code because they don't want to get woken up at 3 a.m. And so it was kind of just a shift and a change that Microsoft made. We're seeing a lot of other organizations do that, but reducing those bugs. They don't provide any value. So let's make sure that we're minimizing those as much as possible. As we map out the processes, we look at 3 different things. And I'll show you guys an example in a second that'll all make sense. But we look at what is a step, where does the work transition from tool to tool, or when do we talk to different people? And so essentially we just kind of map out in the boxes, we align where queues are and things like that. And lastly, it just becomes our delivery cycle. And so what these start to manifest themselves in as, and a little bit of an eye chart, so I'll walk through it here, but this was one that we've anonymized from one of our customers. But the idea is the work starts in kind of that PMO group here. It moves from the BA perspective to gets into the project. You can see all of a sudden there's now these queues that are lining up work. And it goes just through the different kind of software development lifecycle. And I won't go through that with you guys. But there's a couple of things that we measure through this process. The first is the actual lead time. The lead time is the time it takes from when a requirement gets defined. So, hey, I have an idea, let's go build this website, to when it's finally in my customer's hands and being used. And you can see a 76 kind of day time. The other thing that we measure is value added time. So value added time in each of these cycles is how much, like, you can almost equate it to hands on a keyboard. I actually did some of that work. So when I'm provisioning a server, when I actually did work, not when it was sitting in my queue, but when I actually did something to it. And you can start to see this activity ratio showing up, 20%, 30%. Those are all very low activity ratios because it takes a lot of time to get something done, but the value that they're actually providing is pretty small. The other thing that kind of Tim touched on in some of his measurements was this idea of percent complete and percent accurate. It's a really hard thing to measure, but as you start to look through your requirements, are you getting it defined and implemented for your customer as closely as possible? You may, and there's kind of a little bit of game with DevOps, right? I can deploy stuff really fast, so I look good. I'm like Amazon, I can do 100 production pushes a day, but it doesn't mean that you're getting what the customers are actually looking for. And so that's a measurement of measuring the interaction and the engagement that your customers have. So this is a hugely beneficial tool that any organization can bring in. You can map just about any process. We do it a lot from a software delivery perspective because we can measure it from, you know, when requirements get created, when we deploy code, that type of stuff. But it can be done with any process, but it really starts to identify how long things take, and then pretty soon how do we start to optimize those things. So we look at those low activity ratios and we make some tweaks there. The other reason you want to map the entire kind of stream out is you may think, oh, my developers are taking a lot of time, I'll add more developers. Well, then you just actually create a bottleneck a little bit further down the line, or maybe even the front of the line. They don't have enough requirements, they can't test it fast enough. So you want to make sure you have the entire process mapped before you kind of get through it. I'll pause for a second. Anybody questions on that? All right, I'll keep going. The next kind of section we wanted to go through was how do we define work? So Nudesic's actually developed this story development process. Stories are kind of synonymous with Agile and the identification of a requirement, right? That gets passed to developers, it gets created and then passed to QA, et cetera, et cetera. We've really kind of said, let's take a step back and make sure that we have the right parties engaged for when we're developing these requirements so that we're being as effective and, like I said, complete and accurate as possible. So down here at the bottom, we have 3 kind of people. This is kind of that tripod that Mike talked about before. We have the business that's part of that requirement. What do they actually need to do? We have the customers in there. What would you like to see? Maybe that's from an ideation perspective. I know we have kind of a user experience person on our call. But how do we make sure that we're building software that's usable for our customers? And lastly, we have a technology resource because we don't want somebody to create this really elaborate requirement and then all of a sudden it takes us 8 months to get done, but there's not that value in there. So we have all three of those tenets together. And then these are some of the activities, and I won't drain the rest of the slide, but that you do as you start to say, why are we going to be doing this thing? How are we going to do it? And what are we actually building? And there's a number of different activities like design thinking, user story writing. We start to get into the architectural designs and user validation scenarios and user testing and things like that. So we have all of these activities mapped out for you guys of what you do in each of those processes or each of those steps. What it ends up manifesting itself. Is there a question? Nope. Cool. So what it ends up manifesting itself as is kind of this very cyclical process. And so I mentioned before this change of organizations moving from project centric to product centric. This isn't a new kind of term, right? We did it a little bit with SAFe or scaled agile and things like that, but we start to bucket work areas, work streams, products, to use air quotes around that, into these roadmaps. So as the business comes in, we have our competitive analysis, maybe, analysts are coming in. If it's, like Pfizer, right? We have the press kind of pushing us and having things come down the line. We have these high level roadmaps that get created. Now, through that process that I kind of walked you through of that ideation piece and writing those specific stories, we end up with backlogs. Those backlogs become backlogs like we've all worked with when we're using Scrum to deliver software and stuff, but it's a list of requirements. Now, the other key to a lot of this stuff is making sure things are value-based. So that's a new item that's starting to get added to a lot of grooming processes and the story writing processes, is having that product owner or those business stakeholders assign value to things. And so to give you kind of an example of that, it may be, if I implement this story, I'm going to increase my revenue by 2%, or I'm going to increase customer satisfaction by 5%, whatever the metric is. But we want to start defining it. And the reason we started doing this is about 5 years ago, Google went out and did a survey of all the things that they've delivered. They ended up only having about 15% of the items that they released to the public was valuable in terms that people used. There's a lot of products, maybe you signed up for things like, I don't remember the Google social thing, circles or whatever it was called, but they have a lot of stuff that they just released. They thought it was going to be valuable, but no one ended up using it. Everybody laughed at them. Apple, Microsoft said, "Hi, you guys suck at what you do. We're a lot better at it." They went and measured. No one got over 25%. And what it was there just wasn't a lot of that. People were working hard. People were trying to deliver as much software as possible, but they just weren't getting the value back to those customers. So let's start defining what we think that value is and having enough measurements in place across the organization or across our delivery chain, if you will, to make sure that we're capturing some of that stuff. The next thing we're going to walk through is delivery teams. So Tim mentioned before on the call of having the ability to, things are more secure, right? Or we're streamlining development and things like that. What we call that is kind of this holistic team approach. So this is what the traditional kind of software delivery cycle looks like, right? We figure out what we want to do. We figure out what the requirements are. We design it, we build it, we test it, we deploy it, and then somebody manages it going down the line, right? Very waterfall-esque. As we went to Agile, especially with the concept of continuous integration, we started to combine the testing and the development teams. So we started to get a little bit more efficiencies in place. But we still had the outside organization kind of lagging a little bit, or the other streams of work lagging a little bit. As we moved to Agile with continuous integration and continuous delivery, and just a quick definition on CI/CD, continuous integration is the ability to build and test the software and make sure that it can integrate all in one step. And then continuous delivery or continuous deployment is the idea of being able to take that package and deploy it to whether it's lower environments like dev, test, prod, or higher environments like production without a lot of manual interaction. So speed it up, put a lot of automation in place, and we're getting a little bit better. But you start to find we're missing the design team. They're a separate group, right? We have our separate UX team over here, or we have a separate product intake process. as we start to create these platforms or these product teams, and I'll show you an example of them in a second, it's really the entire team all working together to accomplish what we're doing. So how does this kind of look? We had those backlogs on the left-hand side, right? So we took all these stories and requirements. We're making sure they're value-based from a prioritization perspective. And then we flip our dev teams and we into this concept of squads or pods. A squad or a pod is really, in kind of the definitions down here, this cross-functional, multidisciplinary team that can do work. So I raise a hands if somebody has it. Do you have a separate networking team versus a separate server team versus a separate dev team versus a separate integration team, right? They tend to be kind of very broken up and siloed. Let's bring all those team members, Mark. Yep, I got all of those and more, or multiples of those, or even better, right? So let's start to collapse those into those products. So, you know, this is my mobile team, right? Or maybe this is my customer experience team where it's mobile and web and kiosks and however else we engage with our customers. And that whole team's responsible for that set of work. So you have a lead in there, and then there's two different flavors of it. And we haven't quite gotten to this role of the generalist yet, but we have developers and then we have quality assurance resources. You'll see one of those QAs, and you always want this ratio, one manual to one automated, or one manual to automated. You want to front load and put a lot more automation in place to start getting a lot of those efficiencies. But that's one kind of aspect of a squad. The other is just this idea of a generalist. So you don't, and it's kind of the approach that Microsoft took. So instead of saying, you know, here's my dev team and I'm going to pass it off to my integration team and I'm pass it off to my QA team, you're just a team, right? So you all get woken up at 3 a.m. when something breaks. You're all able to fix it. You can all swarm to fix it. Now, there is some specialties for sure that are in place, like maybe a cloud engineer, or maybe it's a, you know, a specific data role, like a data scientist or something else. We bring those in as needed based on the requirement that come in, and then they float back out and they work with another team. So you're not going to have a data scientist dedicated to each of these squads or teams. So, you know, but hopefully the generalists can take care of that. Now, the other piece to make this effective and make this work, right? This is kind of that pie in the sky. Yeah, sure, everybody does this type of stuff. It's the concept of whether it's a center of excellence, so a COE or a COP, which is a community of practice. But essentially, start taking your organization's best practices, how you want to deliver software, how you want to do testing, what your architecture and technology looks like, and start to put those up there. These teams or these communities of practice feed into these groups. So we're starting to get consistency across the entire organization. Any questions on that? I went through a ton of stuff, but Stephanie has it. Perfect. Cool. The last piece is really that maturity model. So we kind of talked about it from a value stream perspective, and this idea of make sure we map everything out so we know where we are today. So as I make tweaks, I see how things are kind of changed, or maybe for the better, maybe for the worst. And then so we can measure it and go back to that. The same thing works as an organization starts to go through this DevOps transformation. And the way we measure it is across people, processes, and technologies. So the people, the you and I, right? We want to make sure that we're happy in our jobs. We want to make sure that we're all challenged and that we're doing a better job. So you can start to see some of those measurements from an ad hoc perspective, right? We're all silos. We're not working together very well, to this, you know, high and elite, highly collaborative groups of individuals. They're getting a lot of value in the work that they're doing. On the process side, we want to make sure that we're documenting our processes. We're not over engineering them. We don't want to process for process sake, because Tim will kill me if we do. But we do want to make sure that we have these methodologies and these consistencies in place to speed up things, the value stream mapping that I was talking about. And lastly, technology. I did say it was only a small piece of the pie. Those first two are the bigger ones, but technology does play a part. Custom development really lends itself to these DevOps models and the idea of integrations and, automations and measuring and things like that. There's a lot of tools out there that help with this, like Azure DevOps or the Atlassian Stack, as I mentioned before. But there is some level of adoption and technology uplift that needs to kind of mature itself, like moving to the cloud or moving to a microservice architecture, that you won't get to these elite states until you have a fairly modern architecture. But like I said, we'll leave this with you guys and a couple of other examples of these maturity matrices so that you can guys go through them and really start to measure yourselves and say, and be honest, right? No, we're a low, like, and by the way, I think so there's a study out there and you can search for it. It's the state of DevOps, and it's a global study. Thousands of companies participate in it. 80% of the companies in the world are in this medium or down, right? Very few are in this high and elite status. So when you're going through it, be honest with ourselves, go, no, we're a low, we're a medium here. And then how do we get better? And that's really that roadmap for an organization to say, okay, well, I have this, standards across my organization. How do I get a little bit better? How do I get a little bit better? And so
Chad,
that's kind of just that last model with it. Yes, Stephanie.
That's the exact perfect transition point for our last poll.
Perfect. And I'm done anyway.
Perfect. Yay, I picked the right point. So go back, please. It's related to the maturity scale. So we were curious, given the conversation, talking about Agile, DevOps, bringing it together, we wanted to know where everybody kind of thinks they are on this overall idea of the maturity model. So going to launch the poll. You've got the scale there in front of you. So would love to see where everybody thinks they are. And I got it at the right time this time. Come on, I know it's getting late. Everybody's getting sleepy. And believe me, Chad, I don't have it all down. I have just been living in methodologies for 20 years. So yeah, I know enough to know that nobody does it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
we can
nobody
talk about it really well, but it's that rubber hitting the road, right?
Well, and I also believe that there's no such thing as best practices, but that's a conversation for another day. To Joe's point, it's hard to select a maturity level if you aren't operating in this kind of structure, but you can apply this to any methodology if you think about it. It's all about, what level of maturity in any methodology, because I don't know that this is necessarily specific. I'm looking at the words. Sorry, I'm a bit of a methodology nut hack myself. I guess you could tell that based on what I said. Yeah. So I guess we'll probably end polling. I won't torture anybody anymore. So share the results. Guess what? Pretty evenly spread along a bell curve. Anybody brave enough to say who said they were elite? And if it's one of the presenters, that's not fair.
Probably is.
Actually, that was me.
Hey, Laura.
And Laura would also be a process and methodology nut like me.
Yes, and so where I got the audacity to say that I was elite was because, like Stephanie, I live and breathe all of this, and I'm a consultant as well. And I just pound this into my clients and create an environment of an elite understanding of process intelligence, as well as the development and rolling out of improvement. So this is something that is the core of what I do. So that's why I had the audacity to rank it that high.
Hey, it's not audacity. Say it like it is.
That's what it is.
All right, perfect. Oh, I will stop the share and let you gentlemen take back over.
And that was it. Nailed it. I think if anybody has some questions, this is that open opportunity for that. And, we're here to talk about it.
Well, I have a question just to kick us off if nobody else does. So, as I think I already mentioned, I'm in cybersecurity, and I haven't always been in cybersecurity, but I have for the last 5 years. So I spend most of my time helping customers deal with security incidents resulting from insecure and vulnerable software, right? And I notice your benefits of Agile, I mean, it was mentioned in the DevOps, but in the benefits of Agile side, doesn't mention security and secure coding at all. So is Agile part of the problem or part of the solution when it comes to?
Hey, Chad, you want me to kick that one off first?
Sure, go for it.
So, Simon, I'm glad you brought that up because I will tell you in years past, and it's only been the last few years where we've supported customers that have had some major hacks. We were working with SANS when they got hacked by Iran. And so we've seen it firsthand how important security is, both with the applications. And as we've moved into things like containerization, things like that, the networking security protocols have gotten even closer to software development. So one of the things that we've learned is that bringing in the security team early and making them part of those squads is critical to long-term cybersecurity. So there are so many things with applications and security holes, and people don't realize they start with the software. So Agile didn't necessarily kind of plug the hole of the security holes in application development. DevOps, on the other hand, really brought it to the forefront and took it to a level where now we can have the developers and cybersecurity and now the skills of cybersecurity are brought into software development right there in the beginning. Chad, you want to add to that at all?
No, I think you covered a lot of it. I will say though, like some of the other pieces, so there's the process piece of engaging the security teams early upfront in the process instead of having it that checkpoint at the end, right? Just before we go to a kind of change control board, let's run it through security first. And then pretty soon we start getting that pressure and CISOs are required to approve things that maybe they don't want to. So obviously optimizing that process and making sure that they're part of the beginning of the ideation phase. And then secondarily, we didn't touch on it too much on this, but from a pipelines perspective, making sure that we're not injecting security vulnerabilities in the code. And so products like GitHub, and there's the kind of some of the security scanning that they have. So it's not even, the developers aren't responsible for it. The organization sets it up, and every time they check in code, it goes through a lot of those security scans to help prevent some of those vulnerabilities. It's definitely still probably the hardest job in all of IT is that security team, because it's constantly playing catch up, right, to the hackers or to the black hats there. But as much as we can engage them early and often, I think the better successes we have and the less vulnerabilities we get.
To piggyback on that, I noticed in one of your slides you called out the COE, the Center of Excellence, and some of the components that made that up. In some of my experience, I've incorporated business process management as well as cybersecurity as key elements of that COE, so that you are capturing those team members up front in any initiative. Do you also incorporate those teams in your COE up front so that you've got a handle on it from the beginning?
Yeah. You can answer that, Chad. Yep.
Yeah, yes, short answer. We just did a project for a large utility here in the Valley. We stood up a couple of different COEs for them, one of which was the kind of a mobile center of excellence, and had a lot of fun conversations with the security team. And interestingly enough, it was kind of twofold. So we had the security team wanting to be a part of it, and how do we develop applications that has personally identifiable information in it and things like that. So they wanted to be a part of those kind of centers of excellence to make sure that we're not retaining data and putting all these policies in place. But also secondarily, we noticed because of the different silos, that existed in the organization, the dev team, the integration team, right, the data teams and that type of stuff. They had all different security people. And so they didn't have this holistic view of the kind of security landscape and the kind of the, I guess, the threat profile, if you would. And so we started to pull them all together, and all of a sudden when they're talking together, oh, I can solve, I don't have to build this elaborate, security mechanism up front from a user authentication. I just will limit the data that comes across that's not secure or that doesn't need to be secured. So actually kind of twofold to your point, Laura. Yes, absolutely, they should be part of those centers of excellence or those communities of practice. And secondarily, if we start breaking down some of those silos, they start to get a little bit simpler, right? The problem, because we're all working on it together. We're swarming to fix it.
Exactly. But one of the challenges there is that, in an agile environment, the reality is that people tend to get a little impatient. That's one of the things about agile, is that it's immediate gratification type of scenario. And when you put those safeguards up front, such as cybersecurity checking and value add in the business process, people can get a little impatient. So I think integrating that and developing patience within the team to make sure things are vetted properly before development, I think is it's something that is valuable to do up front.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it has to be built into the software. I mean, it can't be an adjunct function.
Exactly. That's exactly
check at the end of the sprint. Oh, is this being developed securely? It's got to be developed with a security mindset in the first place.
Exactly.
So the developers have to learn secure coding techniques. I mean, that's just got to be the way it is. I mean, I'm on the advisory board for GCU as well. Sorry, Dan. But anyway, and their software development curriculum didn't actually include security, or not obviously anyway. It was just a kind of side thing, But it's got to be the core of the development. You can't tack it on at the end.
Absolutely. Oh, and Simon and Laura. Oh, go ahead, Mary. Sorry.
No, I said I didn't know I was off mute. I going absolutely.
Yes, but and
might be throwing a little shade over here. Sorry.
So, Simon and Laura, what you brought up, I've seen the cost as well. Customers a lot of times, like you mentioned, Laura, want things immediately and want to cut corners to save costs. I have seen projects where just recently with one of the largest insurance companies in the United States, we built their product, and at the end of it, they wanted to evaluate security, and it ended up costing twice as much because they waited to the end to bring in the security group. And Simon, I'm sure you've seen that once or twice, right? Right. And then, yeah, I've also seen where companies didn't take it seriously and they got hacked. I've seen it cost a company $1 billion. So if it's something the customer realizes long-term and then the risk associated with it, they're going to put it in the beginning of the project, not the end.
Mm-hmm. Cool. But I was just saying, one of the things, so personally, I think Agile can be a real problem for security if it's not built into the team. But one of the plus sides of Agile is that you can fast correct problems. Okay, so I mean, if you do find security vulnerabilities, you've got a very quick life cycle to resolve that, which I think is a definite advantage of Agile. But you shouldn't be getting in the situation in the first place, in my view, or you at least minimize it.
Hey, Steph, do I have time to ask a question?
Well, I was going to ask one too, but you go ahead, Mary.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm directing this at Michael or Chad or Tim, whoever wants to answer, is that if you are an organization that is brand new to the concepts that you've laid out here quite wonderfully, where would you say to start?
Dive in feet first. No, just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, just mandate it. Make it respond, or make everyone do it.
Well, certainly there's a leadership aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first and foremost is you need to have that leadership buy-in at a fairly high executive level, because this is a change of the organization. This is cross-cutting, right? This isn't just IT becoming agile, right? The business needs to start to evolve to some of these changes. So we need to have a lot of the leadership of the organization kind of bought into this. So very much, as Mary, as you mentioned, leadership buy-in, leadership sponsorship, highly needed, not even kind of optional, but required for the most part. The second is grab a team of, I want to say developers, but a team that's worked together well in the past, that are open to change, and have them try and adopt some of these kind of principles. So we went through kind of flow, feedback, and experimentation. And like I said, we'll give you that, and you can kind of just Google the pieces of it, or like I said, the DevOps handbook does a great job of decomposing a lot of those concepts that we had in there. But have them start to adopt things that make sense. Now, not every organization can do all of those different things. You know, we work with a lot of highly regulated environments that require, like some of our customers in Las Vegas, gaming review boards and things like that. So we can't automatically deploy stuff to production. They have to review it. But let's take some of those principles and see if we can get those to work. So things like the drawing a blank, it's late, need a drink, I guess. Everybody else started. But taking some of those principles and just trying it out and seeing if it works or not. So kind of work in those microcosms. That team then becomes your evangelist, right? And so I mentioned that utility organization that we've been working with. One of the last things that we worked with them on was putting a use case together. So instead of just saying, hey, we launched a mobile app, congratulations, and we all clap. Instead, we really focused on the value we brought to our customers, and then secondarily, the value that, or the optimization that we had. So, hey, we released code 10 times faster than we had before. And, you know, we got to speed to market faster and things like that. We then use that as posters and things like that throughout the organization to say, hey, look at this cool team. They did some cool stuff, and kind of using them kind of as your guinea pig. But they also, you need to have those individuals, like I said before, that are open to that change. There's always that kind of mentality of like, don't move my cheese, don't change how my job is. I've been doing this for 15 years, leave me alone. These have to be individuals that are open to this type of thing.
And one thing I would add to that on the people side is looking at, you know, who are the people that will be impacted across any organization or within your team, and then do kind of an assessment or analysis on how easily do you believe that they would be willing to adopt something like this. And then you would start with also bringing in awareness so they know what it would be.
That indicates a very heavy OCM or stakeholder analysis as well. Am I reading that wrong?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
For those that are looking for a quick way to work, there are standard DevOps surveys out there that you could use to actually check your organization and see where they're at. We have ours, but there are those you can find on the internet as well that are very easy to run through.
Okay.
So okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And we just got 4 minutes left. So I'd like, Stephanie, you had a final question. Let's wrap up with you.
And it was actually the continuation of Mary. I should have known. We got like the Vulcan mind meld going. It's so, and it's actually a continuation of what I brought up. What about when you have organizations that have very solidly baked in culture, and you bring in, believe me, I read the Phoenix Project and I thought it was an incredible story. It has incredible concepts, right? But you also have baked in culture sometimes you have to deal with. So you can bring these ideas in. How do you work with that?
Yeah, everyone's a little bit different. Tim and I are, we've got our OCM processes that we put in place. I will tell you what's worked best for me in terms of the DevOps and product transformations have been kind of what Chad talked about, is you find the people that are going to be change agents, and you really get them working well. You get some success behind it. You'll be surprised how fast you'll get success on a team that implements DevOps at a small scale, and how quick everyone starts to copy people that are successful. That has been the easiest path to success for my transformation. I'm not sure, Tim, if you want to. Okay, go ahead, Stephanie.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm the first one to go find my cheerleaders, right? Yeah. I go find my representatives across the organization. And from the South, they're cheerleaders, not evangelists. But I've also seen, I've been doing this for a long time. You've also got to leave room for adjustment, for changes in language, the way you talk about things so that it makes it easier for people to adopt. So they may not call it DevOps, right? They might call it
1,000,000% agree. Yep.
right. So yeah, believe me, I've got a whole ADCAR model thing right there. I'm old school pro-sci change management. I get it. But I learned a long time ago that if you tried to shove something down people's throats, I could walk in with all of my ITIL manuals, they're down there. But every time I tried to walk in and say, here's your manual, go, it doesn't work. And every time I've seen Agile, why do you think there's 50 flavors? You have to look at the concepts, look at what you're trying to achieve, and figure out how to make it work within the organization. That's why I always have to laugh. Anytime that we're talking about methodologies and how they work and PMP, Joe and I could have all kinds of arguments. Where'd he go? He's not up there anymore. There he is. Oh, sorry. I was looking for your t-shirt. I'm PMP from back in the day when they handed me a manual that was based on construction projects. I've seen them work. I've seen them fail. And I'm just wanted to throw out, you always got to have to add the flexibility to figure out what works. Because if you try to be rigid, it won't. It's my 2 cents.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you for that. Nudesic, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate. That was a very, very interesting talk. I think there's a lot. It'd be good to get those slides. We'll, kind of digest them in our own time. But it was excellent piece. Really thought provoking. Thanks so much for that. Also like to thank Emily, Kirsty, and Sophia for joining us this evening. Congratulations and best of luck, right? Best of luck. And, we feel our futures are in good hands just by you guys there. So very pleased to have you join. And Dan, thanks so much for bringing them to the meeting. So just for me to say thank you so much. Have a terrific rest of the evening. Stay safe, and we'll see you in about a month's time. Okay, all the best, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, indeed.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.